Hello everyone, welcome to Methods 1. These videos I post online are there to help you catching up if you have missed the Zoom lectures. They do not replace the online lectures as they're not interactive, but at least they're there to help you getting the information. We start with a very easy chapter, chapter 1, in which we will see how do we collect data in social science? Where do data come from? And can we trust this data? We are surrounded by data in our daily lives. If you read the newspaper these days, you will see these kind of graphs, and they're pie charts. They're a good example of what you see that comes from data collected by social scientists. These are opinion polls done in the American population to know their voting intentions. This is another kind of graph you see in the news these days. This line graph shows the evolution of cases of COVID-19 in the country by province. The data here comes from medical records. Here's another example. This second line graph shows the change through time of the percentage of people in the United States who agree with the Black Lives Matter movement. You see a very strong increase in the last months. Can we trust this data showed online? There is nothing in this graph here. You don't see the sample size. You don't know who was interviewed when researcher asked them if they support the movement or not. You don't know the race of the people represented there. So in the next week, in the next chapters, this is the kind of question you will answer. Can we trust data we see online? All primary research in social science involved a data set. We collect data from individuals. So a set of data includes two things, basically. First, individuals, also called subjects. These individuals are those you want to know stuff about. They can be students, they can be basketball players, they can be Canadian adults, but they're not necessarily people. Even if we call them individuals, they can be something else because you don't necessarily study people when you do social science. Your individuals can be animals, they can be cars, they can be businesses, they can be sports teams, they can be a lot of things, they can be video games, they can be songs. So individuals are those things or those people you want to know about. And the second thing in the dataset is a variable. Variables are there to describe individuals. So for example, if my individuals are students, variables describing them can be their gender, their GPA, how many courses they take, their income, their age, things like that. If my variables are countries, if my individuals are countries, my variables can be GDP, it can be population, etc. So variables describe individuals. Variables can be either quantitative or categorical. This is not written in the slide here, but it is extremely important to be able to differentiate categorical variables and quantitative variables. Quantitative variables are numbers. So if I want to describe you, your salary would be a quantitative variable because it's a number. Your age as well. But your gender will be a categorical variable. Your eye color will be your categorical variable. Who you will vote for, it's another categorical variable because it's not a number that describes you, it's a thing that is something else than a number. In social science, we do not always use the same way to collect data. It depends on the topic of our research. It depends on the discipline, maybe. But we can use a variety of research techniques, and these research techniques will be described in the next slides. Observational studies are done mostly by sociologists, anthropologists, psychologists do it as well. It is when, as a researcher, you observe people, you observe the behavior of people where it happens. It can be in your own country, it can be in your own institution, it can be somewhere abroad, but you go and watch the people, observe the people you want to study. And you do not interact, or if you ever interact, you do not try to alter or to influence these behaviors, because this would bring bias to your research. For example, if you're a sociologist and you want to know how does alcohol consumption will change the behavior of men and women, you can do your observation in a nightclub. You don't pay drinks to people. You don't tell them you're observing them. Maybe sometimes it's not the most ethical way to do things, but it's the only way to do things. And you see people drinking, you see people changing their behavior. So this is an observational study. If you study developmental psychology, you want maybe to know at what age kids start to show gender differences in their games. Well, you will probably, in this case, ask the consent of parents and go to a playground and observe children without telling them you're studying them, because they will behave maybe differently. And you watch boys and girls of different ages. This is another kind of observation. We will study observations a little bit more in methods 2. Surveys are used a lot in social science, in nearly all disciplines. Maybe not in history, but in a lot of disciplines, we use a lot of surveys. Surveys are when you write a questionnaire. Can be very simple, a couple of questions, can be a long questionnaire, and you ask these questions to a sample of subjects. This is called a survey, you know that. In this case here, your population is the entire group you want to study. Suppose that I want to study all Canadians about their voting intentions for the next election. I cannot ask all Canadians, so I will choose a sample of Canadians, and then I will ask them questions, hoping that my sample is representative of the population. Maybe I want to know if you guys prefer courses online or on campus, and I write a series of questions about it, and I ask you, my class, what do you prefer? That's a survey. We do it a lot in social science. A census is the same thing as a survey, with one difference. It includes the whole population, or it tries to include the whole population. It is rarely done by social scientists because it's way too time-consuming and expensive to study a whole population, unless your population is very small, but it's done by governments. And this data is made public for social scientists if needed. So we do use census data collected by government. Experiments are done mostly by psychologists. When I mention experiment, I'm sure in the word treatment, because experiments involved a treatment. You think of medical experiments with medications. But behavioral experiments are done a lot by psychologists. In a behavioral experiment, we impose a treatment on two subjects, but the treatment can vary a lot depending on the nature of the experiment. And then we see if the treatment will cause a change in behavior or a change in results. I will give you an example. Suppose that I want to know if being informed about the life of refugees will change or will influence opinions students have about refugees. So I can take two groups of students, as similar as I can, 20 students and 20 other students. My first group of 20 students will see a documentary on refugees. My second group of students will see any random movie not linked with refugees. And then I will ask them a series of questions about their opinion on accepting refugees in Canada. And I will see if knowing better about this group of people will influence the opinion of students. I can ask myself, as another example, does smoking weed will influence your driving abilities? So I can take two other groups of students as similar as possible, and one group will smoke a joint and the other group will have a glass of water, and then I will test their driving abilities on a motorcycle the safest way, as safely as possible, and I will see if smoking weed will affect the outcome. That's an experiment. So the key word with experiment is treatment. I impose a treatment on to subjects. And this treatment, in this case here, in the example I gave you, one was a joint and another one was watching a documentary. Treatment can be anything in a behavioral experiment. We'll have 2 chapters on experiments later on. A content analysis is a little bit different. It can be done in a lot of disciplines, but instead of directly studying people, you want to know about people, but through the media they produce. So there's no interaction with your subjects. It's a non-obtrusive method of research. So a content analysis is an examination of any type of communication or media. It can be newspaper articles, it can be photographs, it can be videos, web pages, social media profiles, advertisement, movies, video games, movie trailers, etc. So you analyze some type of media that was produced by people to answer some questions. In Methods 2 last year, some of my students were interested in knowing if the gender roles have changed in Disney cartoons since 1937, since the first one came out. They discovered that it's changed pretty much, actually. So that was a content analysis. They watched Disney cartoons. Another student in Methods 2 was interested in knowing to what extent rap videos are show women as objects. So the guy studied a lot of rap videos with a coding sheet and reached some conclusions about that. That was another example of a content analysis.